Well, it's been a while!
Hey guys, welcome back to the Kamui dimension. Let's talk about the happiest character in Boruto, Borushiki. And I want to examine how strong Borushiki actually is. I hear some people say he's weaker than Delta, and some people say he's stronger than 6-Pass Naruto and Sasuke. So today we're going to do a versus battle of Borushiki versus fused Momoshiki. It gives some arguments for both sides, but then I'll tell you which argument seems stronger, and break down the fight a bit more at the end. And I'll also throw in base Momoshiki a little bit as well. To give some context behind this versus battle, let's say Urashiki's time travel turtle went on a trip back in time because Boruto told him to do whatever he wants, and so he messed up the timeline again. And now we have regular Momoshiki and the Momoshiki inside Boruto in the same timeline. And one Momo is mad because Boruto killed him, so he wants to kill Boruto, but the other Momo wants to stay alive inside Boruto, so he fights back and wants to kill the other Momo. And since Boruto wants to live, he just lets Momo take over, kinda like he did when Borushiki fought against Code. And that's actually the Borushiki I'm going to be referring to in this whole video. The one from Chapter 65 versus Code, and the beginning of Chapter 66 versus Kawaki, where he has a decent amount of chakra at his disposal, and Boruto isn't waking up during the battle and screwing everything up. And the fused Momo I'm using is the one we saw where he stole half of Kurama's chakra and was popping pills and stuff. And I know some of you think Momoshiki might have thrown the fight because he saw Boruto's fate and stuff, but we're just gonna assume he was going all out for the sake of this video. And the base Momo will be the one that showed up at the arena. I'm also gonna take the movie novel, manga, and anime all into account for this video. And yes, I know it hasn't been explained yet whether Boruto has base Momoshiki or fuse Momoshiki's powers within his Karma Seal. But it honestly doesn't really matter a crazy amount, and you'll see why later on.
Why's that? Seriously? You asked why?
Now, for a quick public service announcement, stop being like Itachi when he told Sasuke.
Sorry, Sasuke. Maybe some other time.
And made Sasuke upset. Now is the time. Subscribe to make Sasuke happy. So let's first start with the reasons for fused Momoshiki. Boruto only has 82% of Momoshiki's DNA, so he probably only has 82% of Momoshiki's power to draw upon using the Karma Seal. And if it's base Momo's power inside of Boruto and not fused Momo's, then that's even less for Borushiki to use. So from a power and speed standpoint, it seems like fused Momo and base Momo probably have the advantage. Next, neither Borushiki nor Kawashiki have super impressive speed showings. Sasuke was completely off guard when Borushiki stabbed his eye, so that's not much of a speed feat. Being faster than Boru's gigantic blob form doesn't mean shit since he's just a fat blob. Fighting against Kawaki and tired Sasuke post-nerf is okay, but Sasuke just lost a Rinnegan and was tired from being Ishiki's surfboard for an hour, so Borushiki's chakra nerf might just even out with Sasuke's tiredness nerf, so he still might not be as fast as full power adult Sasuke, depending on how much you think the Rinnegan amps Sasuke's speed. And then we see how Kawaki's attacks aren't super fast, given that Borushiki can dodge the rods over and over again. And Toad Stage Mode Naruto was able to dash and save Boruto when Kawaki was trying to kill him with a cube, when Naruto and Sasuke before getting nerfed couldn't really dodge Jigen or Ishiki's rods and had a lot of trouble with his cubes before Baryon mode. So Kawaki's rods and cubes clearly aren't as fast as Jigen or Ishiki's. And yes, Kawaki's attacks can be slower than his movement speed, but neither of them do anything special speed-wise, and they're about the same speed based on their battle and how even they were before Boruto woke up. So the point is, fused Momo might be fast enough that he could just outspeed Borushiki by too much and just win by beating him up with taijutsu. For base Momo, that's a bit more iffy, since after he kicks Naruto at the arena, he doesn't really do a whole lot taijutsu-wise, so Borushiki has better taijutsu and speed showings than base Momo does. But now, I think I should bring up the elephants in the room, the Phoenix, Dog, and Golem. Borushiki might be kinda screwed against those. The dog snake looking thingy was fast enough to snatch Rinnegan Sasuke in the manga and anime, who was saved by Naruto, and as I mentioned earlier, Borushiki might be slower than that Sasuke, or at the very least, probably isn't way faster than him. The Phoenix was pushing Naruto's Kurama avatar back a little bit in the movie, until Sasuke put his gentle hand on Naruto, and then Naruto had a big smile on his face and ripped up the Phoenix. And then the Golem was literally choking out Naruto's Kurama avatar in the manga and anime, before Sasuke added his Susanoo, and then the majestic attire Susanoo beat the Golem up. In addition, Fused Momo got Sasuke pretty good with his fiery Chibaku Tensei thing, and also smushed Naruto between two halves of a mountain or whatever that was, so Borushiki might struggle a bit against those attacks. Unless you think Borushiki's Master Rasengan or Kick can destroy the Golem, he can absorb the Phoenix with Karma, and can just dodge the dog thingy, or blow those up too. That seems just a little bit iffy to me though, so we'll come back to that later. Coinciding with this topic, it was made pretty clear in several different ways that Fused Momo was relative to full power adult Naruto and Sasuke individually. And in the Boruto movie novel, Momoshiki even mentions that if it was one-on-one, he would be able to keep up. But as a team, they were just too much to handle. Now, I know some of you will mention that neither Naruto or Sasuke were at 100% full strength during that battle, since Naruto lost about 50% of Kurama's chakra, and Sasuke had to use his Rinnegan to teleport people to Momoshiki's dimension and blah blah blah. But we also saw Momoshiki have the upper hand against Naruto or Sasuke when they were going 1v1 at moments, like the ones I mentioned earlier, where Momo got Sasuke pretty good with his dog snake or fiery Chibaku Tensei things, before Naruto saved him, and his Golem had Naruto's Kurama avatar being choked out before Sasuke added his Susanoo, and so on. So, I'm just gonna say when you have Naruto and Sasuke full power, it's probably fairly similar to that Fused Momoshiki. They're all around the same general level, regardless of whether you think Naruto and Sasuke in full power are stronger or not. So given that Toad Sage Mode Naruto could save Boruto from Kawaki's Cube, surely adding KCM in 6-Pass Sage Mode, Naruto would be way faster, and so he should be able to easily dodge Kawaki's attacks based on that feat, and so he might just beat Blitz him, which Borushiki couldn't do. And if KCM 6-Pass Sage Mode Naruto might be able to do that, Fused Momo probably can too, since they're shown to be fairly relative in Taijutsu 1v1, although Naruto does smack him around pretty good a few times. This ties in with the point I mentioned earlier. The next 2 points won't really mean much since I'm about to argue against them in a minute, but I hear a lot of people say how Borushiki is relative to nerfed and fatigued Sasuke, and was actually scared of him, since he was like, I gotta be cautious with him. Another thing I hear people say is that Toad with his limiters still on was scared of Toad Sage Mode Naruto, and that's why he took Shikamaru hostage. And so if Code is weaker than Toad Sage Mode Naruto, and Borushiki was, a little bit above Code, then Toad Sage Mode Naruto might be comparable to Borushiki as well, and it seems wacky that Fused Momoshiki, who was relative to KCM 6-Pass Sage Mode Naruto, would also be comparable to Toad Sage Mode Naruto, considering how ridiculous of an amp 6-Pass Sage Mode alone was for Naruto in the War Arc, and so Fused Momo would probably be, a bit above Borushiki in that case. And I think that covers most of the arguments for Fused Momo. So now let's flip it around and argue for Borushiki. Starting with debunking those last 2 points, the Borushiki versus Sasuke isn't the same as the one versus Code and Kawaki. The one versus Sasuke couldn't use much jutsu, and specifically was avoiding absorbing jutsu so Boruto wouldn't wake up, whereas the one from later on spams massive Rasengans and shit, and Boruto won't care about Momoshiki taking over to fight against another Momoshiki. But I guess we can take Boruto waking up into account if we find it makes the difference later on. Furthermore, Borushiki had the upper hand. He smacked Sasuke with the Vanishing Rasengan, and Kawaki was also there helping out, and the whole strategy wasn't even for them to beat Borushiki. It was just to force him to absorb jutsu so that Boruto would wake up. Kawaki literally set himself on fire so Borushiki would absorb it and wake Boruto up, because they couldn't beat him at the time. Then when it comes to the Code being scared of Naruto thing, the problem with this claim is that I can just argue that Code was scared of Borushiki, not Naruto, and so Code took Shikamaru hostage as a way of getting Borushiki off his ass to team up with him and attack Naruto instead. This is way more consistent with the story because Code and Ada were getting concerned with Borushiki's power, which is why Code first took Kawaki hostage, but when that failed, he had to take Shikamaru hostage instead. On the other hand, Code expressed that he was confident that he could probably beat Naruto and Sasuke 1v1, even with his limiters on, and this was without him even knowing that Naruto and Sasuke got major nerfs. Code thought he could beat KCM 6-pass Sage Mode Naruto. So why would he be scared of Toad's Sage Mode Naruto? That makes no sense. I think him being scared of Borushiki makes way more sense. Whether or not Limited Code could actually beat Rinnegan Sasuke or KCM 6-pass Sage Mode Naruto isn't the point. He thought he was enough above Delta and close enough to Jigen, who beat Naruto and Sasuke together pretty bad, to be able to beat them 1v1. Now, I'm not a fan of using one statement to prove a point, but there's a ton of statements, scenes, and plot points implying that Code was the strongest inner member of Kara after Jigen, even with his limiters on, outside of Ada and Damon and any other special cyborgs who were supposed to be dead. We have Code and Boro making fun of Delta for losing to Naruto, and saying that one of them will have to go to work instead, implying that they are stronger, and an early character profile for Code says the same thing. We have an anime-only scene where Boro is arguing with Code, and then Code threatens Boro, and then he gets scared and listens to him, heavily implying that Boro knew Code would beat his ass in a fight because he's stronger than him. We have Jigen assigning Boro to guard Naruto, and Code to guard the Ten Tails, with the assumption that Sasuke would probably go after one of them, meaning that Jigen thought they should be able to defeat Sasuke 1v1, who's pretty even with Naruto, but he didn't assign Delta to do anything, because she already lost to Naruto, so she obviously wasn't strong enough. We have Kashi and Koji asking about Boro and Code, but he doesn't give a shit about Delta and thinks he can just wash her later on, again implying that Boro and Code are stronger than Delta. We have Amato saying that Code was Jigen's strong right-hand man. We have Kawaki freaking out about Code's power being way greater than Boro and Delta's. All of these imply that Boro and Code are stronger than Delta, and then there's a few to imply that Code is stronger than Boro. Code's probably the strongest inner member of Kara besides Ada, Damon, and Jigen. And just narratively speaking, they saved Code as the final inner member of Kara to get any fight scenes, probably because he was the strongest and most important villain in the group moving forward. Now, I know characters can be wrong about things, but every single statement about Code from various characters implies he's the next strongest inner member of Kara after Jigen, and that he was probably around 6th pass Naruto and Sasuke level, maybe slightly above if he was correct about being able to beat them 1v1, or maybe slightly below if he was wrong. Now, as I explained earlier, Fused Momoshiki was relative to 6th pass Naruto and Sasuke individually, maybe slightly stronger or weaker, so if Code really was around the same level as Naruto and Sasuke individually before they got nerfed, as was implied several times, maybe slightly above or below, then he should also be around Fused Momoshiki's level, maybe slightly above or below. And now, I know some people think Delta beats Fused Momoshiki, and Code is supposed to be stronger than Delta, so he shouldn't be way weaker than Fused Momoshiki or anything. I don't agree with the Delta thing, and I know some of you think Delta is stronger than Limited Code too, so I guess that's all in another video for another day. But the point is, Code should be around Fused Momoshiki level based on all these statements. But with that in mind, Code was blatantly inferior to Borushiki and Kawashiki, which would imply Borushiki might be superior to Fused Momoshiki as well. We can then take this from another angle. Naruto and Sasuke were around Fused Momoshiki level individually before they got nerfed, and as a team were way stronger than him, but they were blatantly inferior to Jigen even as a team, meaning Jigen is a lot stronger than Fused Momoshiki. Now, Jigen had 100% of Ishiki's karma extracted and had Ishiki himself controlling him, but his body wasn't the greatest because he was a 1,000-year-old monk, and so Ishiki couldn't use all of his power inside of Jigen, and he couldn't fight for very long, and he didn't use all of Ishiki's abilities either, like the cubes and stuff. On the other hand, Kawaki only had about 80% of his karma extracted, and didn't have Ishiki controlling him, so he wasn't as good at using the abilities as Ishiki was, obviously, and he didn't have all of his DNA to draw upon, but he has a way stronger body than Jigen, so he can fight for much longer than he can. He can use as much power as he has access to, can use Momoshicki's abilities like the cubes with Daikoku Ten, can use his ninja tech in conjunction with those abilities as offensive projectiles and shields for defense, and he can also use ninjutsu on top of that. So in terms of his stamina and arsenal of abilities, Kawaki is clearly superior to Jigen, but in terms of fighting experience, use of Sukuna Hikona and the rods, and drawing on Ishiki's raw power for speed and strength, Jigen is clearly superior to Kawaki. Now, Naruto and Sasuke were blatantly below Jigen as a team, and the Boruto movie novel went in depth to explain that their teamwork isn't like 1 + 1 = 2, but something much greater than that. So Naruto and Sasuke, individually, should be at the absolute max 50% of Jigen's strength, since obviously they aren't 100% as a team since they lost to him. And yes, I know Jigen used some Ten Tails chakra before his fight with Naruto and Sasuke, but we can't quantify how much that amped him since we don't know how much he actually took. It wasn't like he became the Ten Tails Jinchuriki or anything, and we can't say what he mainly used the amp for. Personally, I think it was mainly for stamina purposes because that was Jigen's whole weakness, not that he didn't have enough power, since Ishiki's power was more than enough. And I don't really think the story is going to make the Ten Tails amp that much of a plot point. I think it's probably just going to be looped in with what we consider Jigen's strength to be, but that's all besides the point. We can say it amped Jigen, but we don't know by how much, and even if it did buff him up quite a bit, so does Naruto and Sasuke's teamwork. So I think saying 50% of Jigen's strength is generous enough. Now, Kawaki has 80% of Ishiki's DNA, plus extra stamina and abilities over Jigen. So even if he can't properly use all of the strength from his Karma Seal, he still has a bunch of extra stamina and abilities that Jigen didn't have. So as long as Kawaki can access at least 5/8 of the 80% of Ishiki's DNA he has available, and his stamina from his stronger body, ninja tech, and ninjutsu make up for that little bit of Ten Tails chakra, Kawaki should probably be at least a little bit better than 50% of Jigen's strength. Meaning he should probably be at least a little bit stronger than pre-nerf Naruto and Sasuke individually by that logic. And Borushiki was pretty even with Kawaki, so Borushiki should be as well, and since fused Momoshiki was pretty even with Naruto and Sasuke, Borushiki should be a little bit above fused Momo by that logic, and obviously that would make him above base Momo too. Furthermore, to counter the previous point about speed with Naruto outspeeding Kawaki's cube, there are a few statements to imply that Kawaki is stronger than Naruto now, and is in fact the strongest person in the Leaf Village, whether you agree with that or not. First, we have Naruto in chapter 67 asking Shikamaru, "You suggesting we drive him off because he's too much for us to handle?" Then we have Shikamaru in chapter 68 mentioning how it'd be real bad if we end up antagonizing him, when talking about how it's pointless trying to restrain Kawaki and stuff. And then Amato in chapter 71 says, "And as of right now, there is no one in Konoha who can oppose Kawaki's power, including the Hokage, except for me." Again, heavily implying that Kawaki is stronger than Naruto now. And Borushiki was pretty relative to Kawaki in power and speed. So with that in mind, Toad Sage Mode Naruto probably isn't just gonna speed blitz and destroy Kawaki or Borushiki just because he's a Boruto from a cube. Now I want to move away from the scaling stuff and talk more from a narrative perspective, and that's in regards to what Borushiki has to offer that a live Momoshiki didn't have. When it comes to Momoshiki versus Naruto, Sasuke, and the 5 Kage, it was made very clear what his major weaknesses were. He needed to absorb jutsu to fire back jutsu, or needed to eat chakra pills to whip out his red Rasengan looking jutsu, so once he ran out of ammo, he had nothing left to use on his own. He relied on chakra pills for power instead of honing his skills, so he wasn't a very skilled fighter with taijutsu, and he was super cocky and constantly underestimated the humans, so he got his ass whooped. And while eating Kinshiki improved Momoshiki's taijutsu by granting him Kinshiki's speed and strength, he does not show as much skill with taijutsu and swordsmanship as Kinshiki does, as Kinshiki was giving Sasuke way more trouble 1v1 up close with taijutsu than fused Momo ever does. and in both cases Sasuke was lower on chakra from using his Rinnegan to teleport. Now let's look at Borushiki. He can whip out Boruto's jutsu on his own, like Shadow Clones and Vanishing Rasengans, and he inputs way more power into Boruto's jutsu than Boruto can do himself, or he might be applying his amplified jutsu called Takami Musubi no Kami, or the Reign of the Emperor jutsu, to make those massive Rasengans that Boruto can't do on his own. He fights way more skillfully with his taijutsu, and is very creative with his ninjutsu, creating jutsu like the Rasengan, and he doesn't get as ridiculously cocky against the humans anymore, at least not against Naruto and Sasuke, as he saw him be very cautious against Sasuke, even though he just got done stabbing Sasuke's Rinnegan out, and watched Sasuke get whooped around by Ishiki. Essentially, Borushiki fixes all of Alive Momoshiki's biggest weaknesses. His problem wasn't a lack of ninjutsu power or anything like that. It was that he couldn't do most jutsu on his own, was way too cocky, and didn't train and work on his fighting skills. Similarly, Borushiki also fixes Boruto's own weaknesses. It's been emphasized several times that Boruto is incredibly skilled and talented, but he doesn't have massive chakra reserves and insane power like Naruto does. Good examples of this is how when Boruto first learned the Rasengan, it was tiny, but he also invented the Vanishing Rasengan, or how Boruto didn't have the power to create a massive Rasengan, but he had the skill to create the Compression Rasengan. Momoshiki supplies Boruto with the insane power, and Boruto supplies Momoshiki with the abilities and skills he didn't have. They make a perfect tag team. So that's why saying, oh, Boruto's only 82% Momoshiki, so therefore Borushiki's weaker, isn't telling the full story. And that's also why it doesn't matter a crap ton whether it's fused or based Momo's power inside of Boruto, because the benefits Boruto adds to Momoshiki's abilities far outweighs whether or not Kinshiki's speed and strength is inside that Karma Seal as well. Momoshiki vs Borushiki is pretty similar to Kawaki vs Jigen in many ways. It's a battle of power versus hacks, but in the case of Borushiki and Momoshiki, the gap in power isn't as great. The last thing I'll mention, before finally breaking down how the fight could go, is in regards to Momoshiki's Golem, Bird, and Dog. Even though we only saw fused Momo use these abilities, there's a good chance that base Momo could do these as well, just maybe not quite as strong. Now you might be asking why I think this is the case.
Why?
You ask, why?
Like all Atsuki so far, Momoshiki and Kinshiki are based on Japanese folktales, with Momoshiki being based on Momotaro, and Kinshiki based on Kintaro. Momoshiki's Golem, Phoenix, and Dog Thing also come from the tale of Momotaro, as Momotaro befriends a monkey, dog, and pheasant, and they help him on his quest. And Momoshiki's Phoenix represents the pheasant, the dog snake-looking thing represents the dog, and the Golem represents the monkey, as it looks kinda like a monkey. These three creatures have absolutely nothing to do with the tale of Kintaro or Kinshiki's abilities, which are all weapon and samurai based, fitting in with the tale of Kintaro, so it just doesn't really make any sense for why Momoshiki would have gained these abilities from eating Kinshiki. So, there's a good chance base Momo actually had these abilities before, but just hadn't used them yet. But eating Kinshiki likely still made these abilities stronger than they would have been before. And so if base Momo was able to use these attacks, base Momo might be stronger than a lot of people give him credit for, and again this could pose a problem for Borushiki. But then again, since Borushiki can access at least some of Momoshiki's abilities, it remains possible that he could do these as well. However, for the sake of this video, I'll assume Borushiki can't, at least not yet, since he hasn't shown any signs of being able to, and I'll also assume base Momo either can't or will choose not to, since he never used them either. Now, with all those arguments for both sides in mind, let's now finally break down how a versus battle could play out against each other. So, the first and most obvious thing to mention is that base Momo, fused Momo, and Borushiki can all absorb jutsu, so the battle's going to have to start with taijutsu, so we're primarily going to be looking at how they all compare in taijutsu. So let's start with Borushiki versus base Momo. If base Momo came into the fight without any ammo, he's going to lose, because Borushiki just has much better taijutsu showings, and can use Shadow Clones and Shuriken Jutsu to try and make a diversion to stab base Momo's hand. and then hit him with a Master Rasengan. If base Momo has all the ammo he had at the arena, and Boruto waking up counted as a loss for Borushiki, because for some reason Boruto doesn't want to fight him, then Borushiki would lose because he'd have to absorb that gigantic Reign of the Emperor jutsu Momo used on the arena, and I think that would definitely wake Boruto up. But if we assume Boruto just lets Momo stay in control because he's trying to kill the other Momo, then Borushiki can just absorb that jutsu and proceed to beat base Momo up. I know some of you might say that Borushiki is just using base Momo's taijutsu knowledge and skill, but considering how Borushiki learned Boruto's Shuriken Jutsu and Ninjutsu, he very well may have learned Boruto's taijutsu skills, and you know what, he may have even retained some of Kinshiki's taijutsu prowess if Boruto has fused Momo's power inside of him too. And either way, we never saw base Momo show much promise with taijutsu, so I'm gonna say he loses that battle. Now for Borushiki versus fused Momo, I think the evidence from the scaling arguments earlier points to Borushiki being a more dangerous threat than fused Momo was, withholding the Golem, Phoenix, and Dog. Because even if fused Momo holds more power and speed, Borushiki's use of Boruto's jutsu without needing to absorb it, his better taijutsu skills and more sneaky fighting style, not having to worry about his hand getting stabbed and losing his absorption ability, and less ridiculously overconfident demeanor makes him much more dangerous against most opponents like Code, Delta, Jigen, and so on, than fused Momo would be. Furthermore, Borushiki seems to have learned some of Boruto's taijutsu skills, and he also makes use of shadow clones and other jutsu, which would reduce the gap in taijutsu abilities between Borushiki and fused Momo, even if Momo is faster and hits harder. Furthermore, it would fit into Borushiki's sneaky fighting style to use shadow clones, vanishing Rasengans, and Shuriken Jutsu to stab fused Momo's hand so that he can't absorb jutsu, and then go in for a massive Rasengan for the kill. Meanwhile, fused Momo could stab Borushiki's hand all he wants, but it wouldn't stop him from absorbing jutsu, since it's the Karma Seal doing that and not his Rinnegan. In addition, Naruto and Sasuke were both shown landing quite a few hits against fused Momo when going 1v1 for a moment, even though they weren't at full power. So if you take the scaling from earlier to heart, Borushiki's speed and skill might just let him smack fused Momo around, since he still wasn't very skilled to taijutsu and swordsmanship like Kinshiki was. The problem, however, is the Golem, Phoenix, and Dog. Even if Borushiki can absorb the Phoenix and just dodge and destroy the Dog, it's tougher to say that he's just going to blow up the Golem with a massive Rasengan or a kick or something. And he might not be able to save himself from that fiery Chibaku Tensei thing fused Momo used on Sasuke in the Boruto movie. Naruto and Sasuke were fortunate that they have giant avatars that can combine together to fight those kinds of attacks. Yes, Jigen kicked through his Susanoo and Kurama avatar and could probably manage to kick that Golem apart, but Borushiki is not Jigen. And yes, Borushiki kicked gigantic blob fat Boro around, but can he destroy the Golem with a kick? I don't know about that one. And that's essentially what this fight is going to boil down to. Can Borushiki defeat fused Momo's Golem, and other things like that? If no, then fused Momo probably wins. But if yes, then Borushiki probably wins. Overall, I think base Momoshiki is probably the overall worst fighter here. Then Borushiki and fused Momoshiki are probably not ridiculously crazy far off of each other. But I do think narratively speaking, they want to scale up all the fights with Code, Ada, and Damon being stronger than Jigen, and so Borushiki is probably the strongest fighter out of the three, because they want him to be, even though him and Kawaki have no great speed feats. My overall verdict is that fused Momo probably holds more raw power with his jutsu, but Borushiki is overall a more dangerous fighter. I want to know what you guys think though. After hearing me give reasons for both sides, who would you say is the strongest, and how strong would you say Borushiki is right now? Let me know in the comment sections below, but that's a wrap on today's video, so now it's time for me to say...
Sorry, Sasuke. Maybe some other time.
So subscribe, leave a comment, like the video, and hit that bell icon for notifications. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll catch you guys next time. Bye.